The Florida sun beat down on the asphalt, turning the community center parking lot into a skillet. I was wrestling my wheelchair out of my truck's tailgate, sweat beading on my forehead, when a voice cut through the air like a chainsaw through a piñata. "Hey, you, what do you think you're doing?" I turned to see a woman, mid-50s, perm so tight it could double as a helmet, storming toward me like she'd been personally offended by my existence. Her name, I'd later learn, was Karen Mitchell, the HOA's unofficial hall monitor and self-proclaimed defender of handicapped parking spaces. She jabbed a manicured finger at my truck, parked neatly in a blue-striped spot, and screeched, "That's for disabled people. You're not fooling anyone, buddy." I froze, one hand on my chair, the other gripping my prosthetic leg's socket under my cargo shorts. A crowd was forming, neighbors with reusable grocery bags, conference attendees in polo shirts, even a couple of HOA board members pretending to check their phones. Karen's voice hit a pitch that could summon dolphins. "I've seen your type, faking it for the perks while honest folks circle for spots." She demanded my disability placard, her phone already out, ready to live stream my apparent crime to her 47x followers. The audacity was almost admirable, like watching a peacock strut in a pig pen. Now, I'm Mike Callahan, 52, retired Army medic, and I faced worse than a suburban vigilante with a vendetta. 15 years ago, a roadside bomb in Kandahar took my left leg below the knee, leaving me with a titanium replacement and a knack for spotting nonsense. I'd driven to this gated slice of Florida paradise to deliver a keynote speech at a veterans charity conference, not to star in Karen's personal episode of Parking Lot Justice. But here we were, her face redder than a stop sign, accusing me of scamming the system. I could have snapped back. Lord knows I had a few choice words lined up, but something told me to play it cool. See, I knew something Karen didn't, and that secret was ticking like a time bomb. Let's rewind to that morning, before this circus kicked off. I'd woken up in my Tampa condo, brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to wake a coma patient, and checked my speech notes. The conference was a big deal. Hundreds of veterans, donors, and local bigwigs, all gathered to raise funds for prosthetic research. I'd been speaking for years, turning my story of loss and grit into something that inspired others to navigate the VA's red tape or fight for their benefits. My prosthetic, a sleek carbon fiber number, lets me walk, run, even hike on a good day, but I use a wheelchair for long gigs like this to save energy. People see a fit guy with a crew cut and assume I'm too healthy to be disabled. Happens all the time. Cashiers side-eyeing my placard, strangers asking why I really need it. Usually I shrug it off. But Karen? She was a Category 5 hurricane of entitlement, and I was ready to let her blow herself out. Here's a question for you folks. Ever run into someone who thinks they're the sheriff of your life? Maybe a neighbor who measures your grass with a ruler or a coworker who polices your lunch break. What's the wildest thing a Karen's accused you of? Drop it in the comments. I'm dying to hear your predictions for how this plays out. Me, I've got a soft spot for these types. They're like human HOA violation notices. Annoying, but you can't help but laugh at the effort. Karen was giving it her all, pacing around my truck, muttering about calling the cops. I leaned against the tailgate, letting her monologue run its course. "You think you can just waltz in here?" she huffed. "This is our community." The crowd was split. Some nodded along with Karen. Others whispered that she was out of line. A guy in a golf cart slowed down, probably hoping for a brawl to spice up his afternoon. I pulled my placard from the windshield and held it up, nice and slow, like I was showing a toddler a flashcard. "Here you go, ma'am. All legal." Karen squinted at it, then scoffed. "That proves nothing. Anyone can get one of those." I bit back a grin. She was digging her own grave, and I had a front row seat. "You'll see soon enough," I said, locking my chair and rolling toward the community center's glass doors. Karen shouted after me, "This isn't over. Oh lady, you have no idea." Inside, the air conditioning hit like a blessing, but I could still hear Karen's voice echoing outside, now ranting to some poor event staffer about non-residents abusing privileges. I glanced back through the tinted windows. She was filming my truck, probably narrating her manifesto for the HOA group chat. The crowd lingered, buzzing with gossip. I wheeled toward the conference room, my speech notes tucked in my bag, feeling the weight of what was coming. Karen thought she'd caught a fraud red-handed, but she'd just picked a fight with the wrong vet. And trust me, what happened next? It was going to be one hell of a show. The community center's lobby smelled like burnt coffee and ambition, a mix of conference name tags and HOA busybodies milling around. I was maneuvering my wheelchair past a table of lukewarm donuts when I caught Karen's voice again, sharp as a tack and twice as annoying. She'd cornered a harried event staffer near the registration desk, waving a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws like it was the Constitution. "Non-residents can't just park in our handicapped spots," she declared, loud enough to turn heads. "I want this man investigated now." I stifled a laugh, rolling toward the conference room. "Oh, Karen, you're preaching to the wrong choir." She had no clue I was the guest of honor, and that little detail was about to make her day a whole lot worse. Inside the conference room, I parked near the stage, checking my setup: mic, slides, a bottle of water to keep me from roasting under the spotlights. My speech was in an hour, and I needed to focus, but Karen's crusade was like a bad radio jingle stuck in my head. "I'm Mike Callahan, 52, ex-Army medic turned motivational speaker, and I've dealt with skeptics before, VA clerks who lost my paperwork, strangers who think my prosthetic means I'm fixed. But Karen, she was a special breed, the kind of person who'd argue with a stop sign and expect it to apologize." I leaned back, picturing her out there, probably drafting a 10-page email to the HOA board. Let her dig, I thought. The deeper the hole, the harder the fall. That morning, I'd been up before dawn, reviewing my talk, breaking barriers, a mix of my story and practical tips for veterans navigating the system. 15 years ago, a bomb in Kandahar left me with a stump and a new perspective. The real fight wasn't the injury. It was the VA, a labyrinth of forms and denials that nearly broke me. Back in '09, a clerical error flagged my claim as incomplete, stalling my benefits for 2 years. I fought tooth and nail, learning every loophole until I got what I was owed. Now I teach others to do the same, cut through the red tape, stand up to the gatekeepers. Speaking gigs like this one, for a veterans charity in sunny Florida, are my way of paying it forward. But Karen's outburst in the parking lot? That felt personal, like she'd sniffed out my confidence and decided it was a threat. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through notes, when my buddy Tom, the conference organizer, slid into the seat next to me. "Mike, your fan club's at it again," he said, smirking. Tom's a former Marine, built like a fridge, with a laugh that could scare birds. He nodded toward the lobby, where Karen was now lecturing a second staffer, her voice carrying through the glass doors. "She's emailing the HOA board, CCINGS, demanding your credentials. Says you're not disabled enough to park there." I snorted. "Credentials? Tell her to check my Purple Heart. Or my prosthetist bill. $50, 000 oughta convince her." Tom shook his head. "She's trouble, man. HOA types like her live for this. You sure you want to let it ride?" Tom had a point. Karen wasn't just a loudmouth. She was a machine, fueled by self-righteous fury. I'd seen her kind before, back when I lived in a condo complex up in Jacksonville. Our HOA president, a guy named Gary, once fined me for unauthorized patio furniture while I was deployed. Took me 6 months and a lawyer to get it dropped. Karen was cut from the same cloth, the type to measure your mailbox height with a ruler and call it justice. But I wasn't worried. See, I'd done my homework. This community's HOA had hired me to speak, sure, but they'd also asked me to consult on their accessibility policies. Ramps, parking, the works. Karen's little tantrum was about to crash into a brick wall of irony, and I was holding the blueprints. I glanced at my watch, 45 minutes to showtime. The room was filling up, veterans swapping stories, donors adjusting their ties, a few HOA folks eyeing the free coffee. I tweaked my slides, adding a line about overzealous gatekeepers. Just for kicks. Karen's voice drifted in again. She'd moved to the hallway, now on her phone, probably rallying her minions. "Yes, I saw him walk. He's not in a wheelchair all the time." I chuckled. Lady, you're about to learn the difference between assumption and evidence. My prosthetic lets me walk short distances, but for a day like this, hours on my feet, schmoozing, speaking, I save my energy with the chair. It's not a prop, it's strategy. But explaining that to Karen would be like teaching a cat to fetch. Tom leaned in, lowering his voice. She's telling people you're a fraud, Mike. Some of the board's listening. I raised an eyebrow. Let em. They'll eat their words with a side of crow. I dealt with worse, like the VA rep who called my injury minor because I could still salute. Karen's noise was just that, noise. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. Doubt always does, especially when you've fought for every inch of your recovery. I flashed back to those early days, hobbling on crutches, my wife wiping tears as we faced another denied claim. That fire still burns, and Karen was pouring gas on it. I rolled to the stage ramp, testing it smooth, ADA compliant, one of my suggestions from last month's audit. Karen slipped into the conference room just then, her eyes locking on me like a hawk spotting a mouse. She plopped into a front row seat, arms crossed, whispering to the guy next to her, probably spreading her gospel of suspicion. I caught her glare and gave her a nod, nice and slow, the kind that says, "Keep talking, pal." She flinched but didn't look away. Good. I wanted her to watch every second of what was coming. Tom tapped my shoulder. "You're enjoying this too much." I grinned. "Just enough, Tom. Just enough." I adjusted my mic, feeling the room's energy shift as more folks filed in. Karen was out there thinking she'd caught a con artist, but she just stepped into my ring. And when the bell rang, she wouldn't see the punch coming. The conference room lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. Veterans, donors, and a smattering of HOA suits, all waiting for the main event. I rolled onto the stage, my wheelchair gliding smooth as whiskey on ice, and adjusted my mic. Karen sat front and center, arms crossed tighter than a bank vault, her smirk screaming she thought she had me cornered. Then the MC's voice boomed, "Please welcome Captain Mike Callahan, Purple Heart recipient and advocate for disabled veterans." A wave of applause hit, loud enough to rattle the cheap chandeliers. Karen's face froze, her eyes wide like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Gotcha," I thought, giving her a wink. The game was on, and she didn't even know the rules. The spotlight was hot, but I was in my element. I kicked off with a story, Kandahar 2010, the blast that turned my left leg into a memory. 1 minute, I'm checking a Humvee's tires, I said. The next, I'm airborne, wondering if I packed enough socks for heaven. The crowd chuckled, leaning in. I'm Mike Callahan, 52, ex-Army medic, and I've learned to spin pain into purpose. My talks aren't about pity. They're about fighting the system, whether it's the VA's paper jungle or skeptics who think a prosthetic means you're cured. I glanced at Karen, her jaw clenched, and added, "Some folks love to judge what they don't understand. Ever meet someone like that?" Hands shot up, a few laughs rippling through the room. Karen sank an inch in her seat. My slides clicked forward, stats on VA delays, like how 20% of claims get denied on the first go, leaving vets scrambling. I shared my own fight. 2 years of rejected forms. A clerk who called my injury non-service connected because of a typo. I didn't lose my leg to lose my dignity, I said. So I learned the rules and beat 'em. The crowd nodded, some jotting notes. I was here to arm them. Tips on appeals, legal aid, even how to charm a bureaucrat's socks off. But Karen? She was fidgeting, her phone glowing under the table, probably typing another manifesto. I'd bet my truck she was emailing the HOA board, doubling down on her fraud theory. Lady, you're about to crash harder than a bad stock tip. Flashback to my first speaking gig, a VFW hall in Georgia, 2012. I was nervous, still getting used to my prosthetics pinch. A heckler, some guy in a trucker hat, yelled, "You don't look hurt to me." I froze, then cracked, "Buddy, you don't look smart, but I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt." The room roared, and I learned a lesson. Humor disarms doubt better than anger. I'd faced worse than Karen. VA reps who questioned my scars, neighbors who side-eyed my placard. Each time, I turned their skepticism into a chance to teach. Now, with Karen glaring like she'd invented the stink eye, I saw an opportunity. Not just to shut her up, but to show this crowd what happens when you underestimate a vet. I shifted gears, talking accessibility, ramps, parking, the stuff I'd been consulting on for this community's HOA. Ever try wheeling over a curb? I asked. It's like climbing Everest with a flat tire. More laughs, but Karen wasn't biting. She whispered to the guy next to her, a suit with an HOA badge, pointing at me like I was Exhibit A in her witch hunt. I kept rolling, dropping a line I'd added just for her. Gatekeepers think they're protecting the rules, but sometimes they're just guarding their own egos. The crowd murmured agreement, a few glancing her way. Her whisper faltered, but she didn't quit. Tough cookie, I'd give her that. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Tom, texting from backstage. Karen's at it again. Says you're misrepresenting your status. Board's getting antsy. I smirked. Misrepresenting? I'd sent the organizers my DD-214, my VA records, even a photo of my prosthetic for their promo. Karen was swinging at a ghost, and I was happy to let her tire herself out. I wrapped up a section on legal aid, sharing a hotline number, 800-827-1000, the VA's benefits line. Call it, I said. They'll put you on hold till Christmas, but don't quit. The crowd loved it, their energy feeding mine. I was building to the big finish, but Karen's squirming kept pulling my focus. She wasn't done, she was plotting. I paused for a sip of water, scanning the room. Veterans with canes, donors in pressed shirts, HOA folks clutching their agendas. Then Karen, her face a mix of defiance and doubt, like a kid who just realized the teacher was onto her. I leaned into the mic, voice low. Ever been judged by someone who didn't bother to learn your story? More hands went up, including, surprise, a couple of HOA board members in the back. The air shifted, a quiet ripple of solidarity. Karen's smirk faded, her phone now dark. I held her gaze, just for a second, and said, "Stick around, folks. Someone's about to get a wake-up call." The crowd leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. I clicked to my next slide, keeping my cool, but inside, I was grinning like a fox in a henhouse. Karen thought she was running the show, but she'd just bought a front-row ticket to her own reckoning. And when it hit, oh, it was going to be sweeter than a cold beer on a hot day. The conference room was electric, my speech hitting its stride. Veterans nodding, donors scribbling, the air thick with purpose. I was mid-sentence, explaining how to appeal a VA denial, when Karen shot up from her front row seat like a jack-in-the-box with a grudge. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice slicing through the room. "I have a question." Every head turned, jaws dropping as she pointed at me. "How do we know you're not exaggerating your injury? You look perfectly fine to me." Gasps rippled, a few veterans muttering curses. Karen stood tall, chin up, like she'd just cracked the case of the century. I leaned into the mic, grinning wide enough to show my teeth. "Oh, lady, you just made my day." This was it, the moment she'd regret forever. The crowd held its breath, eyes darting between us like they were watching a boxing match. I'm Mike Callahan, 52, ex-Army medic turned speaker, and I faced tougher critics than Karen Mitchell, HOA tyrant and self-styled detective. But her stunt? It was bold, I'd give her that. I waved her forward, nice and easy. "Come on up, Karen. Let's settle this." She hesitated, her smirk flickering, but pride pushed her toward the stage, heels clicking like a countdown. I rolled to the edge, unbuttoned my cargo shorts leg flap, and showed the crowd my prosthetic. A sleek carbon fiber number, gleaming under the lights. "This cost $50,000, I said, tapping it. "Wanna guess how I paid for it? Spoiler. Not by faking anything." The room erupted. Claps, whistles, a few hell yes from the back. Karen froze, her face paling faster than a Florida tan in February. I didn't mean offense," she stammered, clutching her phone like a lifeline. I chuckled, keeping my tone light but sharp. "No offense? You just called me a liar in front of 200 people. That's not a question. It's a performance." The crowd laughed, tension breaking like a dam. I turned her fumble into a lesson, spinning to the audience. See, folks, assumptions are like bad intel. They'll leave you exposed. I glanced at Karen. Right? She mumbled something and started back to her seat. But I wasn't done. Hang on, I said. Let's talk about looking fine. Guess I should limp more to pass your disability test. More laughter, louder now, as Karen sank into her chair, her HOA badge glinting like a scarlet letter. I'd learned this trick years ago, back when I was a kid in Philly, dodging a bully named Joey who mocked my limp. Pre-injury, just a bad knee from football. Joey cornered me once, called me Gimpy, in front of the team. I didn't swing. I smiled, asked if he practiced his trash talk in a mirror. The guys roared, and Joey slunk off, deflated. Humor's my jab, quick, clean, and it lands harder than a fist. Karen was Joey 2.0, all bluster and no backup, and I was enjoying this way too much. I clicked my slides forward, easing back into my speech, tips on VA appeals like requesting your C-file to spot errors. But my mind was racing. Karen's outburst wasn't random. It was desperation, her last swing before the truth hit. Offstage, my buddy Tom, the conference organizer, was digging dirt. He texted me during a pause, checked HOA records. Karen sued neighbors over fences, hedges, even a birdhouse. She's a serial complainer. I grinned, picturing her inbox. Novels of self-righteous fury, probably typed in all caps. She thrived on control, and my parking placard was her latest hill to die on. Too bad for her, I'd brought a bulldozer. The crowd was still buzzing, feeding off the drama. I leaned into it, sharing a story from my VA fight. How a clerk once said my injury wasn't visible enough to qualify for priority. Visible enough? I told her. Want me to mail you the x-rays? The room laughed again, veterans nodding like they'd heard it before. I tied it to Karen's stunt. Some folks see a fit guy and think he's fine. But scars aren't always skin deep, and neither is strength. A few amens rose up, and I caught two HOA board members in the back whispering, one pointing at Karen. Trouble was brewing, and not for me. Karen sat rigid. Her whispers to her neighbor stopped cold. I kept rolling, wrapping my section on legal aid numbers for pro bono lawyers, like the DAV's hotline. But her interruption lingered, a spark in dry grass. I flashed back to that Philly kid again, outsmarting Joey, knowing every jab built confidence for the next fight. Karen wasn't just a heckler. She was a mirror, reflecting every doubter I'd faced. VA reps, strangers, even myself on the worst nights, wondering if I'd ever be whole. Beating her wasn't about ego. It was about showing this crowd you don't let gatekeepers win. I checked my watch, 15 minutes left. The crowd was locked in, but Karen's eyes burned holes in the stage. She wasn't waving the white flag. She was reloading. Tom slipped me another text. She's muttering about a complaint to the state. Says you're mocking her. Mocking? Nah, I was just letting her rope run out. I closed my slide deck, building to my big finish. A call to fight for what's yours, whether it's benefits or respect. The applause started early, rolling into a standing ovation as I thanked them. Karen stayed seated, her face a storm cloud. As I rolled off stage, Tom met me, grinning. You slaughtered up there, man. She's done. I shook my head. Not yet. She's got one more move. I'd seen it before. Corner types like her don't quit. They double down. And when she did, I had a surprise waiting. One that'd make her parking lot tantrum look like a warm-up act. The reception hall buzzed with post-speech chatter. Veterans swapping war stories, donors clinking glasses, and the faint hum of HOA gossip in the air. I was nursing a soda, shaking hands with a Marine who'd loved my VA tips, when Karen swooped in like a vulture circling roadkill. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed, her voice low but venomous. She leaned close, her HOA badge glinting like a sheriff's star. I'm reporting you to the state for fraud. Mocking a concerned citizen, her eyes gleamed with righteous fury, expecting me to flinch. I sipped my drink, slow and deliberate, then smiled. Karen, you might want to check the guest list before you dial that number. Her brow furrowed, but I was already rolling away, savoring the bomb I was about to drop. The crowd parted as I wheeled toward Tom, my buddy and conference organizer, who was grinning like he'd just won a bet. "She's still swinging, huh?" he whispered, nodding at Karen, who was now typing furiously on her phone, probably drafting her complaint to the governor himself. "I'm Mike Callahan, 52, ex-Army medic turned speaker, and I faced bigger threats than Karen Mitchell's email rampage. A VA that lost my claim for 2 years, a bomb that took my leg. But Karen? She was a special kind of stubborn, the type who'd argue with gravity and demand an apology. And that made this moment all the sweeter. Time to end this," I told Tom, pulling a folder from my bag. My ace in the hole. See, I wasn't just the keynote speaker. A month ago, the HOA hired me to audit their accessibility compliance. Ramps, parking, the whole 9 yards. I'd spent weeks digging through their records, cross-referencing ADA laws, even walking their lots with a tape measure. And guess whose name kept popping up? Karen's. Not for good deeds. She'd racked up violations like a kid collecting baseball cards, blocking handicapped ramps with her golf cart, parking in blue-striped spots during emergencies. Read, yoga class. Her complaints about my placard? They triggered my report, and now the HOA board was itching to talk. Flashback to my prep for this gig. Holed up in my Tampa condo with coffee and code books. I'd found the ADA's fine print, Title III, public accommodations, requiring clear access paths. Karen's golf cart habit wasn't just rude. It was illegal, risking thousands in fines. I'd flagged it in my report, along with her emails to the board, whining about overzealous disabled parking rules. Irony's a harsh teacher, and I was about to hand her the syllabus. Back then, I'd hesitated. Nobody likes playing snitch, but Karen's parking lot meltdown changed my mind. She didn't want fairness. She wanted control, and I wasn't here to let bullies win, not after fighting my own battles. Tom waved over 2 HOA board members, Ed, a retired CPA with a comb-over, and Linda, a realtor who looked like she'd sell you a house and a lecture. "Mike, you got that report?" Ed asked, glancing at Karen, who was now schmoozing a donor, oblivious. I handed over the folder, thick with photos, dates, and my notes. "Page 12, I said. "That's the good stuff." Linda flipped it open, her eyes widening at a shot of Karen's golf cart parked across a ramp, time-stamped last month. "She said it was temporary," Ed muttered. I shrugged. Temporary like her temper tantrums. Tom snorted, and Linda's lips twitched. She was on my side. I rolled back to the crowd, letting the board do their thing. Karen was still at it, cornering a staffer, waving her phone like a flag. I caught snippets, misrepresentation, public safety, and shook my head. She was a one-woman tornado, tearing up her own credibility. I flashed back to my lowest point, post-injury, when a VA rep denied my claim because my paperwork lacked urgency. I'd wanted to scream, but instead, I studied, fought, won. That's what I did now, turn doubters into lessons. Karen wasn't just a pest. She was a chance to show this room what happens when you pick the wrong fight. Ed and Linda pulled Karen aside, their faces grim. I couldn't hear much, but her voice rose, shrill and defensive. "That's absurd. I was helping the community." Ed held up my report, pointing at a page. Karen's mouth opened, then shut, like a fish realizing the hook was set. The crowd noticed, whispers spreading, veterans, donors, even the bartender leaning in. I sipped my soda, playing it cool, but inside, I was dancing. The board marched her to a corner, and Linda laid it out. Her violations weren't just fines. They cost her HOA privileges. Voting rights, committee seats, gone. Karen's face went from red to ghost white, her phone slipping to her side. She stormed toward me one last time, eyes blazing. "You set me up." I raised an eyebrow. "You set yourself up, Karen. I just brought the receipts." She sputtered, searching for a comeback. But the crowd's stares weighed heavy. She spun and marched out, heels echoing like a retreating army. Tom clapped my shoulder. "That was surgical, man." I grinned. "Just doing my job." The reception rolled on, folks sharing their own Karen stories, nosy neighbors, petty bosses. I mingled, but my mind was on her exit. I'd won, no question, but a part of me wondered if she'd learn anything. Bullies like her don't change easy, they just find new hills to die on. Still, I'd shown this room something bigger. Fight smart, fight fair, and the truth hits harder than any tantrum. Back in my Tampa condo, the AC hummed like a lullaby, and I was sprawled on the couch, a cold beer sweating in my hand. It had been 3 days since the conference showdown, and the dust was settling, well, mostly. My phone pinged with a voicemail from Tom, the conference organizer, his voice crackling with glee. "Mike, you won't believe this. The HOA board's fast-tracking your accessibility fixes. Karen's gone radio silent, probably licking her wounds." I chuckled, picturing her fuming in her McMansion, her HOA badge collecting dust. "I'm Mike Callahan, 52, ex-Army medic turned speaker, and I just turned Karen Mitchell's parking lot meltdown into a masterclass on comeuppance. But the real win, knowing I'd left that room of veterans and donors with more than a laugh. They had fight in them now. Rewind to that night, post-reception, when I'd driven home under a Florida sky thick with stars. I'd played the day back, from Karen screeching in the parking lot to her ghost white exit after the board dropped the hammer. She'd blocked ramps, parked illegally, and thought she could bully me. A guy who'd stared down VA bureaucrats and won into submission. Her suspension wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a neon sign flashing, "Karma's open for business." I sipped my beer, grinning. Sure, I'd savored her downfall, call it human nature. But the bigger thrill was the crowd's reaction. Veterans swapping stories, donors pledging extra, even HOA folks admitting their rules needed a gut check. That's the stuff that sticks. I leaned back, thinking about what makes a Karen tick. She wasn't evil, not really, just a control freak who'd built her kingdom on petty power. Reminded me of a mentor I had in the Army, Sergeant Ruiz, who'd laugh at life's curveballs. Lost a supply drop once, middle of nowhere, and he just shrugged. "Can't control chaos, Callahan. Just outsmart it." That stuck with me through Kandahar, through the VA's paper maze, through every skeptic who side-eyed my prosthetic. Karen was my latest chaos, and outsmarting her felt like a nod to Ruiz. Proof I'd learned the lesson. But here's the kicker, chaos doesn't quit. She'd be back, maybe not at me, but at someone. And I hoped, just a sliver, that she'd rethink her playbook. My phone lit up again, this time with an X notification. I tapped it and holy hell, a clip from the conference had gone viral. Some attendee, at Vet with Grit, posted my prosthetic reveal, captioned, "Don't mess with this vet. HOA Karen gets schooled." 3 million views and climbing, comments flooding in, "Legend. She thought she had him LOL. This guy needs a Netflix special." I scrolled, laughing. Karen's meltdown was now internet folklore. Her righteous glare immortalized in 4K. I'd lie if I said it didn't feel good. But it wasn't about gloating. It was proof. Stand your ground, keep your cool, and the world notices. That clip wasn't just a roast. It was a flare for every vet, every underdog, fighting their own Karens. The viral buzz tied to something bigger, something I'd learned scratching my way up. Life's full of gatekeepers. HOAs, VA clerks, busybodies, who thrive on making you feel small. But they're not invincible. I'd faced my own, like that VA rep in '09 who called my injury minor, because I could still sign my name. 2 years, 3 appeals, and a lawyer later I got my benefits. That fight taught me to study the rules, wield them like a blade. Karen didn't see it coming. She thought her bylaws were a shield, not a trap. And when I flipped the script, showing the board her violations, it wasn't just for me. It was for every guy in that room who'd been doubted, dismissed, told to sit down and shut up. I stood, well, balanced on my prosthetic, and grabbed another beer from the fridge. My condo's walls held memories. A Purple Heart in a frame, photos of my old unit, a dog-eared copy of the ADA code I'd studied for gigs like this. Each one a reminder. Life's not about avoiding punches. It's about hitting back smarter. Karen was a punch, loud and sloppy, and I'd countered with precision. The HOA's changes, new ramps, better parking were my real trophy. not her suspension. Though, yeah, watching her storm out, heels clacking like a defeated general? That was a close second. Here's the truth, folks. Life's too short for Karens. They'll scream, they'll scheme, but they crumble when you bring facts and a grin. Call them out, laugh it off, and keep moving. And if you loved this story, man, I hope you did. Smash that like button, share it with your buddies, and hit subscribe. Drop a comment. What's your craziest neighbor story? I'm all ears. Oh, and don't forget the bell icon so you never miss a tale like this. I've got more fights to win, more Karens to school, and I'm just getting started. Next speech is in a week, and I'm already polishing my lines. Who knows? Maybe another gatekeeper's waiting. If they are, I'll be ready with a smile and a surprise.